أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وحكمة النبيين اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome everyone to what we would call philosophy part 2. There was a question that was asked some time back on the book that was recommended, and the book club has taken up on reading that was pertaining to certain concepts on pages 6 from page 7, I think, to 10. And I thought that we could probably do a reading on that to explain what that's about. But then I actually remembered something that Sayyid Naqib al-Attas himself, and I think he mentions this in his I think he mentions it himself in the preface or somewhere in here, but he did hold this as a requirement for reading his books, is that you have to read his book line by line, phrase by phrase, because what he's doing is he's building an entire argument. So the whole book is one argument pertaining to the introduction of metaphysics of Islam. And then each chapter is its own sort of sub-argument and then sub-argument like this. So for you to understand, you really have to go line by line. And so I figured, we should actually do this. Instead of me going through pages 7, 10 in the middle, I should actually start from the introduction so that then that portion can be understood. And I remember actually there was another question that was asked a couple of days ago pertaining to religion and spiritualism and esotericism, and we had answered those questions in the group chat. But the introduction actually addresses those questions. So I thought, okay, we'll do this instead and start from an introduction, because we did introduce the subject of philosophy, but now we would introduce the actual study and the process and the methodology. And for that, I want to first and foremost lay out the principles or the method of how to study, because philosophy is not just something that you sort of get into. A lot of people who quote unquote get into philosophy end up doing what we would call dabbling with the subject or dabbling with philosophy, and that's very dangerous. It's the reason or the core reason for why scholars prohibited philosophy. And so to start off with that, we have to look at the basic history of why that prohibition came into play. What was discovered in the early stages was when different kinds of works were coming into Islam from the expansion of the Muslims, particularly from Persia, where a lot of Roman and Greek works were transferred after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Muslims started having access to the libraries of the Persians, and they started looking at these books. And they were very intrigued by this, because one of the principles of the Prophet ﷺ is that he encouraged the pursuit of knowledge. In one of the hadith, even if you have to go all the way to China to seek it. And so that drove them to want to learn more and study more. And they were encountering these books like the works of the Greek philosophers, but they didn't have any criteria by which to determine whether or not it was right or wrong. And their first and foremost exposure was to these works, which were, if you read them, I have the works of Aristotle, I have the works of Plato. If you read them, they're very logically sound, because that's what philosophy does. Philosophy builds logical, reasonable arguments. When you read it, it makes a lot of sense. But in what framework are you studying it? And what framework does it fall under? Under what criteria is it determined to be, right or wrong, or truth or falsehood? Because within its own framework, it can make sense. But then when it is actually brought under light of other frameworks, it can create a lot of problems. And this is where the Muslims started seeing those problems, is that dabbling with philosophy was causing a lot of contradictions with what revelation had provided. If you look at, one of the things that Imam al-Ghazali, I think, really did for this ummah was to present a middle ground, because philosophy is not altogether something that is to be, removed entirely from the tradition, but it's also not something that is altogether to be embraced by the tradition. There's a kind of a tension that the ummah has always maintained, and that tension has to be there, because that tension maintains the balance. So the debate of haram or halal continues onwards, whether it's permissible or not. What we would actually be debating here is at what point does it become haram, and at what point is it allowed to be so that it is beneficial. And this is where the tension rests. So Imam al-Ghazali sort of maintained that tension when he wrote his book Maqasid al-Falasifa, and then he wrote Tahafut al-Falasifa, first outlining what are the objectives of the philosophers. What are they trying to achieve in philosophy? And here he outlined that the method of the philosophers is a very good method of study, of inquiry, of understanding, of arriving at certain truths. Then he wrote the incoherency of those methods. He said there are certain limits whereby that method doesn't yield any results, particularly to do with the unseen, because rationality stops. Beyond that, you cannot just use logic to uncover truths and establish them as evident. Individuals later on, like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, wrote heavily against the philosophers, and his main issue really was the logicians. The logic is one of the prime instruments of philosophy. You cannot do philosophy without logic. It's impossible. And his issue was using logic in a manner that ignores the assumptions which initiate any kind of logical train of thought. And those assumptions are, he argued, because philosophy, like Socrates said, all philosophy begins from wonder. I wonder if it's like this, I wonder if it's like that, and then reason starts exploring the possibilities and then arriving at the truth of it. So those are the assumptions. And this is where he held the problem. He said, what if your assumption is wrong? The logic might be sound, 2 + 2 will always give you 4, but what if your assumption of it was wrong? And so there are a lot of issues that arise from philosophy that make it difficult, or rather would place a prohibition on them. A lot of them, like, for example, like I just mentioned, 2 + 2 = 4. Well, the logic is sound when you say 1 + 1 = 2, right? One of the questions that was asked, I think in the group, if I remember correctly, was with regards to the word zawjain in the Quran as it pertains to pairing. And I said that Islam rejects duality. And so the question was, well, what about this ayah, which speaks about Allah has created all things in pairs? Well, that's where you would, if you have the wrong assumption, then you would end up, having a false attribution as to what that means, because that does not mean dual. For example, if you look at the union of man and woman in marriage, a man and woman in marriage is not 1 + 1 = 2. It's actually half and half equals 1. A union in this case, because it's one, we would say that that's not a duality. It would be only a duality in the sense of complementation, like one complementing another. So two things coming together, complementing each other, but it's not an absolute duality to say that these two are separate and distinct entities completely all by themselves, which is what the modern world kind of presents, that man is his own thing and woman is its own thing. And so there must be some kind of equality here established between in the social, political, economic dynamics of it, which is untrue, because we do not subject to duality here. If there is any kind of duality, it's only complementary, but we still acknowledge that the man is his own thing, in the sense that when he is paired with the woman, the man's weaknesses are complemented by the woman's strengths. And likewise, the woman's weaknesses are complemented by the man's strength. So we're not really calculating 1 + 1 = 2. We're actually calculating half and half equals 1. And this is where the logic will make sense. If you look at the, 1 and 1 = 2, the logic makes sense, but it's not fundamentally true. This is what the issue with philosophy really is. It's the assumptions. The assumptions can lead an individual astray, terribly astray, without them even knowing it. So, these things have to be taken into consideration. First and foremost, I'll give you two principles. It's a very broad topic to just talk about the how to study philosophy, but just to give you two principles that will keep you aligned. Or rather, let me put it as three principles so that the third one can be distinct in its own right. The first is that you do not go into philosophy with just dabbling, just a taste of it, just, okay, I read Plato once in a while just to keep myself academically proficient. That's not allowed in Islam. Dabbling in certain practices or certain sciences or certain, just to get a taste of it. No. If you want to study, then do it properly and do it in its entirety and with the objective of reaching mastery, whether that takes you 6 months or it takes you 20 years to achieve. But do it with that objective and do it with that discipline that is required of it, not just occasionally reading a couple of books because it will help you get an understanding of something else or make you more academically proficient. And this, by the way, dabbling also includes all these self-help materials, things that come out of like the life coaching industry and mentorship industry. And I'm sorry if that's you, like you're a life coach or you consider yourself one, or you've got this mentorship business thing going on. I'm sorry, what you're doing is worse. It's far worse than what a philosopher would do, because what you're doing, you're actually astray yourself and you're leading other people. This is the blind leading the blind, because your fundamental premise is actually false and you don't realize it. People who think that they're life coaches, first of all, for you to be a life coach, your premise, your claim fundamentally should be that you have mastered life. You've mastered life and you hence now have the qualifications to lead other people and to guide other people through life, which is just fundamentally false. It's just completely false, because we are all human beings in this world. Nobody comes in with mastery and nobody acquires mastery during lifetime. It's impossible. You only acquire mastery at the point of death, is when you've completed your term, is when you've finished the process of life. And even then, every single human being will acknowledge that they didn't master anything, that they made mistakes, that they went through difficult periods where they made wrong judgment calls. Even prophets undergo that. Even prophets acknowledge that we make mistakes. The Quran itself identifies prophets who shows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you they made certain mistakes here. Even our Nabi made mistakes. So who are you to come in and say, I've mastered, I know all the shortcuts. You see, I can show you how to hack through life. Life is not a computer program that you hack through software and find a shortcut way through to success. You know, this idea, this is a very nonsensical, very stupid idea that Muslims have developed, to be very blunt. And I'm sorry if you're in that, you don't like my words, that's too bad. Change your career if you need to change your career, but you're actually on the wrong path. You are the blind who is leading the blind. And I've seen a lot of these setups, you know, entrepreneurship and your pathway to business success, and become your own CEO, generate passive income for you and your halal sunnah investments, and all these kind of nonsensical terms. But these are the dabblings in philosophies whereby the individuals who come up with this, they don't even realize what they're doing. They're actually dabbling in philosophies that are not of Islam. And when subjected to the criteria of Islam, they fail, as we'll look at when Sayyid Naqib al-Attas in his introduction starts talking about worldview. We're going to talk about the worldview. What does Islam present as a worldview? If your worldview is materialistic, it's dunyawi, then you're going to start spewing these type of ideologies. Because remember, language defines thought, and thought determines worldview. So if your language input is that sort of language, then you're going to cultivate your reality accordingly. And you're going to start talking about entrepreneur success and business success and CEO, and you are in a delusion. You're in a state of utter delusion. I've seen a lot of people, one person, one individual has got a website that is set up. Oh, I have my own business, quote unquote, and the title is CEO. CEO of what? CEO of what, really? Where's your business? Where is it located? How many employees do you have? How are you actually operating your business? CEO of what? You're just elevating yourself to a rank that it's just an aspiration. You're never going to get there to be like a CEO of some big corporation. It's a false aspiration. Yeah, you're making money, you can show that. That doesn't equate to success. At least not as far as Islam is concerned. And even then, at least not as far as anyone with sense is concerned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines for you what is success. And that's the language of Islam. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The one who has success, the one who attains success is the one who has purified himself. That is the definition of success. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On that day, nothing of this will benefit you. Not your legacy, not your wealth. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart. That's your objective here. That's all that requires. Success is in fulfilling that objective. So what is this business success that you're endeavoring for? What is this CEO that you're aspiring to be? You couldn't be anything else in the world. So this is what you found now. And then you took a course made by some guy somewhere who wrote a book, 10 Steps to Becoming a Rich Muslim. Or you read a whole bunch of other self-help books, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. You thought that is profound, that's wisdom you're getting. That's pseudo philosophy. Fake. Remember we spoke about bad philosophy. That's bad philosophy. That's not real philosophy. So now you have a course now, you paid a course for it. You went and did a course for it online. The course that will get you to success. Rubbish. So that was the first principle of don't dabble. Don't get into, you might even not know it. You think it's something that's harmless. You think that's something that is has got no implications, or it's not that big a deal. It's just a self-help book. It's just a course. It's just so and so. But you have to remember, whether you're philosophizing or not, whatever language is coming into you will define your thought and it will define your worldview, and then you will cultivate it accordingly. So if your language set is full of vocabulary, terminology like CEO and business success and entrepreneur and such and such and life coach and mentor coach and all these things, then you will cultivate your reality accordingly. Okay. And if you don't understand what you're doing, if you don't even know what you're doing, then know for a fact that if you do not learn to philosophize, someone else will philosophize for you. Someone else is going to fill your head with those terms and those vocabularies. And that is guaranteed to lead you astray. Second principle, if you do want to go into philosophy and the study of philosophy, very beneficial, but you need to have certain sciences in place. You need to have a certain kind of training in place. And the first and foremost of this training is the science of logic. You cannot do philosophy without logic. I know a lot of people had trouble reading this book, the Prolegomena. It's actually pronounced Prolegomena. I keep on spoiling it, but just excuse me. You'll find that Sayyid Naqib actually speaks purely in a logical language. He's got terms, he's got compound terms, he defines his terms, he sets his premises, he builds a syllogism, and then he presents you with a conclusion. Then that conclusion, he carries it forward to the next argument. He builds it further like this. This is why he said you need to read this line by line. But to really understand what he's doing, you need to have at least practiced logic well enough until it becomes an intuitive thing. So the course that we did before, last year before, that course is still beneficial. It was not just meant for you to be an expert in psychology, but it'll actually may help you be an expert in basically every field, because you will apply that science in every field of study, but most particular in philosophy, because every field of study ultimately will lead you to philosophy. It's got a philosophy behind it. It's got ideology embedded in it. And for you to break it down, for you to analyze it, you need the right tools. And that tool is logic. So in our tradition, mantiq was part of what's known in the sciences as one of the ulum al-ala, instrumental sciences. It's like grammar is one of those instrumental sciences. It's meant to give you the necessary tools with which to apply in other fields of study. So don't get into philosophy. Don't open like books of Plato or Ibn Sina or any such. I mean, I recommended this because Sayyid Naqib actually wrote it for public consumption, for the public to be able to read it. So he wrote it in a much more simpler language than he would otherwise. If he was in a class teaching philosophy, he would not be speaking in this type of language. But even then, you can see how complex it is, because you're not attuned to logic. But if you get attuned to logic, it actually becomes very easy. So, we have the course. The course is available on YouTube for free to go through. 20 sessions, I believe they were. We have the book as well, which was published. I know it's difficult for a lot of people in different parts of the world to get the book. It becomes an expensive affair to order it and to with the shipping and all that. But inshallah, we don't actually have the infrastructures built yet to facilitate ease of print and distribution in different parts. But for now, still make the investment. If you need to make that investment, make the investment, get the book. I'm not saying it for me to increase my book sales. I'm saying if you want to do this, then you need that. You cannot do philosophy without an understanding of logic. So get the book, study it, study the concepts, practice it, in real life, and cultivate an intuitive understanding that you can then just apply. You wouldn't need to then transfer or refer back to those books. You can just apply it intuitively in these fields of study. And the third principle is that you have to always remember, whenever you go into philosophy, you do not abandon your aqeedah and your fiqh. These are your foundations. You do not go into philosophy without, when you're looking at something that's philosophical, you always look at it from the lens of Quran and Sunnah. And this is what Sayyid Naqib does from the introduction. This is what he establishes. Before you go into what is metaphysics, what is quiddity, what is intuition, what is the intellect, what is the meaning of life, and what all these profound things, questions and whatnot. Before you go into that, you need to establish first and foremost the lens with which you're going to examine those things. Because going back to what the scholars argued, it's the assumptions. The problem is not the philosophy. The problem is not you trying to philosophize. It's in your nature to do so. You are created a reasonable and rational being. It's in your nature to do so. The problem is the assumptions that you will start off with. You need to clean those up first so that you have certain parameters, boundaries that you do not breach, you do not cross over. Otherwise, you may end up going astray. You will not even realize it. And people do go astray. A lot of people do go astray. And this is, you can see this even among Muslims at present. So anyway, I hope that will help as we go along, inshallah. If there are any questions, I'll answer them accordingly without having to make this a whole course about philosophy, because I think it's really important for people to read this book and to understand it. It's like a gateway into and this is something that's necessary as far as having, at least if not having a fully qualified philosophers in the ummah, we need to have at least an ummah that can, number one, identify what is philosophy, so that when they see it out there, especially from the modern world, the modern secular world, they can see it from afar, that this is an ideology, I need to be careful with this. They can identify its plus and minus points. And then they can also, build for themselves a shield, a defense against the influence of those ideologies, for themselves and for their families and for their children. Alhamdulillah. So let's begin with. I'll just read as much as I can, and I'll explain as I go along. I think we might do up until let's see how far we can go, because it's very there's a lot of depth in it. From his introduction, right? And he says, Dr. Naqib, he says, from the perspective of Islam, and note this word, this term, perspective, because he uses it in different manners. Because perspective is part of every human being. Everyone has a perspective. What you would call a nadra. A nadra is a perspective, right? In Urdu, you have the word nazar, not nazar, but it's more like a nazriyat. I think that's the right word. Nazriyat? Is it?
Nazriya.
Nazriya. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that's a perspective. Everyone has a perspective, but it is subjective, because each person has their own subjective view of reality and their understanding and their opinion of reality. From the perspective of Islam now, as a whole, a worldview is not merely the mind's view of the physical world and of man's historical, social, political, and cultural involvement as it has been reflected, for example, in the current Arabic expression of the idea formulated in the phrase "Nadrat al-Islam lil-Kawn." This is the term. Like, if you want to do this, you want to try this, use a translator, or look up in an Arabic English dictionary, what's a world view? And the translation of the word world view in Arabic, you will find something like Nadrat al-Alam or Nadrat al-Kawn. And right there, he's saying that's a false term. So he's going to establish the worldview first, so that he can then guide you through the rest of the process. What is the worldview of Islam? Once you grasp that, it now becomes the lens by which you will see everything else. But first and foremost, that we need to clean out the corruption that's taken place, and this is the corruption of language. The Western world has done its utmost to corrupt the language of Islam. Utmost. That's why you have all these nonsensical terms in our day-to-day vocabulary. Sharia compliant, Sunnah investment, halal business, halal passive income, entrepreneurship. I've seen people coming up with all sorts of allegorical interpretations, like, Khadija radiallahu anha was the first woman CEO in Islam. That kind of language, that rubbish, decrypt, asinine form of language has corrupted our way of seeing reality, because now our worldview is following that language structure. So first and foremost, he's going to negate that and deny that meaning, and he's going to explain why he's doing that. So the phrase نظرة الإسلام للكون. It is incorrect to refer to the worldview of Islam as a نظرة الإسلام للكون, as a نظرة. This is because, unlike what is conveyed by a نظرة, the worldview of Islam is not based upon philosophical speculation formulated mainly from observation of data, of sensible experience. Islam is not built off of worldly experience. It doesn't arise from the world of sensible experience, of what is visible to the eye, nor is it restricted to the kaun, to the world, which is the world of sensible experience, the world of created things. If such expressions are now in use in Arabic in contemporary Muslim thought, it only demonstrates that we are already being unduly influenced by the modern secular Western scientific conception of the world that is restricted to the world of sense and sensible experience. I mean, this man, he wrote this book in, when was this published? Well, he wrote the preface in 1995, but I think, he had the second preface in 2001. So this was published in 2001. I mean, this is 25 years ago. If he could see the kind of vocabulary that is being used today, I don't know what he would say to that. But here he's saying that if such a term is already being used, then we are already being unduly influenced by the modern secular Western conception of the world that is restricted to the world of sense and sensible experience. Islam does not concede to the dichotomy of sacred and profane. The worldview of Islam encompasses both dunya and akhirah, in which the dunyawi aspect must be related in a profound and inseparable way to the akhirah aspect, and in which the akhirah aspect has the ultimate and final significance, is negating the concept of duality that was asked. The idea of there being two separate, distinctive entities in which we can choose between the two. So Islam, like we said, does not have duality, though we make distinctions between these domains or these dimensions in reality. Dunya and akhirah, samawat and ard, jism and nafs, body and soul, like this. Though we make the distinctions, you have to understand that these are all created by Allah to complement each other. Like body and soul, they function together. They are not separate entities in the sense that there is complete separation between them. That both have got their own equal. You basically just choose which one you want to believe in. So there's this group that believes only in the physical and the material and the bodily, and there's this other group that has the spiritualism going on, right? Islam does not have that duality. They both function together. So the dunyawi and the akhirah, they function in a way that the dunyawi must complement the akhirah. So that what you do here must contribute to what objective you aim to achieve over there. This is what Islam presents as a worldview. Your worldview, meaning as far as this world is concerned and life is concerned, what is its purpose? Its ultimate aim. And Islam answers this as that the ultimate aim is the akhirah. And therefore what you do here must contribute to that ultimate aim, that ultimate purpose and objective. The dunya aspect is seen as a preparation for the akhirah aspect. That's what he's saying. Everything in Islam is ultimately focused on the akhirah aspect, without thereby implying any attitude of neglect or being unmindful of the dunya aspect. When we pay attention to what we do in the world now, we pay attention to it in such a manner as that this action, this deed, even as small as mundane as switching on the lights, for example, is oriented towards fulfilling an objective that would fulfill the ultimate teleological objective of the akhirah. Reality is not what is often defined in modern Arabic dictionaries as waqi'iyah, whose use particularly in its grammatical form, waqi'i, is now vogue. Vogue meaning fashion or trend. It's now in trend. And he's kind of being rhetorical here. You find in the Urdu language, I think it's used a lot, waqi mein, which is used to denote basically in reality. But that's actually a false attribution or a false term. And I don't know if speakers like, not speakers, but writers like Muhammad Iqbal ever addressed that term. I'm pretty sure he did. That the waqi is actually just a realistic version of the haqiqi. And that's he's going to explain that actually. Because it denotes what is realistic. It's not real itself, it's just realistic. It's the waqa'iyah of it, meaning the effectual element of it. So yeah, the waqa'iyah of my environment here is that there's a chair and there's all this, but there's a reality behind that, which is an essential reality. It could be pertaining to the reasons why it's like that, or why it is here, or where did it come from, or what meaning or purpose does it fulfill, that higher reality. So the modern perspective, which utilizes reductionism, and I think he addresses reductionism in this book. If not in this book, then he speaks about it in his other, I think he speaks about it in Islam and Secularism. It's like everything is reduced to a materialistic perspective of the world. So, understanding of reality, as he says, is reduced to the sensory and sensible world only. And Islam does not advocate that and does not entertain that at all. And so he explains what is the waqiyah. He says reality is haqiqah. It's haq because it is from al-haq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reality is haqiqah, which significantly is now seldom used due to the preoccupation with waqiyah. As people are preoccupied with the occurrent world, with the phenomenological aspect of reality, with what's going on around them, and they delight in this, and they really indulge in this, and they're completely lost in this. This World Cup that's going on, that's really testament of that. If you see people like the way they would be dressing out in the streets, and they're in a completely different state of mind. They're lost. To them, what they're doing is the ultimate experience of reality. There could not possibly, in their worldview, be anything higher than what they are enjoying at that moment. It's really astounding. They're completely lost. أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل أولئك هم الغافلون. They're completely heedless. They're just lost. worse than livestock. So, which is significantly now seldom used due to preoccupation with waqiyah, which only points to factual occurrences. A factual occurrence is only one aspect in many of haqiqah, whose ambit, if you don't know what ambit is, ambit means scope or parameters, whose expansiveness, how much it can encompass, whose ambit encompasses all of reality. Moreover, a factual occurrence may be an actualization of something false, that is batil, whereas reality is the actualization always of something true. Something false can happen, something wrongful can happen in the world. Yes, it happened, that's a fact. The fact there is encompassing what is not right, what is false. The fact itself is subject to change, and facts do change. They change over time. When new variables are determined or new conditions are discovered, the facts then change. What might have been right is now seen as wrong, or what might have been wrong is now seen as right. So there was a time where it was a factual thing that most of European women, prior to even Islam coming into the picture, European women dressed in head coverings. That was their hijab. That same European worldview, which was a fact, a historical fact, and at that time in its occurrence, it was the right thing to do. But that same European civilization now presents that same fact as it was the wrong thing to do. They changed the fact to themselves. So what is the value or the truth value of a fact then? Is it reality? By argument, no, it would not be reality. It's just waqiyah. It just happened in the world. It's not haqiqah itself. There's a deeper haqiqah behind it, which encompasses, the haqq encompasses all of reality, not just the outward physical form of reality, or what is recorded in the history book, or in the textbook, or in whatever record, or in whoever's opinion. It's not just that. Reality, haqiqah encompasses all of reality. Whereas reality is the actualization always of something true, i.e. haqq. What is meant by worldview, according to the perspective of Islam, is then the vision of reality and truth that appears before our mind's eye, revealing what existence is all about. For it is the world of existence in its totality that Islam is projecting. Thus, by worldview, we must mean ru'yatul Islam lil wujud, a visionary understanding, not just an individual's perspective of their nazar in the outward sense of what their eyes and the sensory experience tell them about reality. Islam's worldview precedes that physical understanding, and he's going to explain now what that is. Where is that preceding understanding coming from? The Islamic version, and this is the first time he's used the term Islamic, and I would not agree with the use of that term Islamic, but I think it's the only way to really define it. So because it then comes, it would be ideal to say the vision of reality and truth in Islam is the proper way to say that, I think. But anyway, he's saying that. So the Islamic vision of reality and truth, which is a metaphysical survey of the visible as well as the invisible worlds, including the perspective of life as a whole, is not a worldview that is formed merely by the gathering together of various cultural objects, values, and phenomena into artificial coherence. What he means by a metaphysical survey is by way of language. By way of language and inward experience. What we say about the language internally that molds your understanding of what reality is externally. And so by way of that inward experience of piety, of righteousness, of virtue, of morals, of ethics, these are all explored in philosophy. So it is from that lens now. That vision, what he's talking about, is from that metaphysical lens, which surveys both the physical, the visible, what you can see with your eyes and touch and feel, as well as the invisible, which is the ghaib. And the first requirement of belief, as depicted by Surah Al-Baqarah, is belief in the unseen. Alladhina yu'minuna bil ghaib, right? Those who believe in the unseen, including the perspective of life as a whole, not as a fragmented thing. He's going to talk about the fragmentation later on somewhere. He's going to mention about this fragmenting perspective. So it is not a worldview that is formed merely by the gathering together of various cultural objects, values, and phenomena into artificial coherence. The worldview of Islam is not something that is determined by cultural aspects. And unfortunately, Muslims have done this. They've reduced it to cultural aspects. So it seems as though the Islam of the Indians is different from the Islam of the Pakistani, and that the Islam of the Pakistani is different from the one of the Turk, and the one of the Turk is different from the one of the Arab, because their culture does it differently, and that one's culture does it differently. And if it is culture that is demonstrating or building your Islam, then that's not Islam, and it's not an Islamic worldview. If you want to use that term, it's not a worldview of Islam. Islam, the worldview of Islam, is not built by that. It's not built by cultural transformations. It's not built by things that are artificially stitched together as far as this world is concerned. And he explains artificial here in a footnote. I mean by artificial coherence, a coherence that is not natural in the sense we mean fitrah. Such coherence projected as a worldview must necessarily be subject to change with the change of circumstances, meaning that artificial constructs are subject to change by necessity. If it is part of this world, it is subject to change. And so if those constructs change, then your worldview will also change, isn't it? Because if your worldview is based off of something that is temporary, then when the temporary transforms into something else, then your worldview will also transform. And I mean, like I said, he wrote this 25 years ago. The paradigm shifts that what he was experiencing during his lifetime was very different. It could be he has evaluated it from decade to decade, which is how really the transformation took place from the 40s. Then you had the 50s with a different culture, 60s coming up with a different culture, different trends, different fashions. If he was to see the transformations that just took place in the last 5 years, I think it would drive him insane trying to quantify that. Because in the last 5 years, those cultural shifts have transformed so many times. Now, if the Muslim worldview was based off of those cultural shifts, then they were basically being on a new religion every new year. Every new year, it's a new religion. Nor is it one that is formed gradually through a historical and developmental process of philosophical speculation and scientific discovery. So it's not even in the short-term aspect, neither is it in the long-term aspect, or the overall arcing of the transformation of ages and paradigm shifts. Because the Western world went through their dark ages and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the scientific, the industrial and the technological, and now the pure debasement and debauchery and the antichrystal age, basically. They've gone through all those transformations in the long run. And those philosophies that originated at that time have transformed step by step. They've gone through a different transformation, and then a different worldview originates from that. And then that results in a different paradigm shift, and a different one originates from that. Islam, likewise, does not follow those cycles either. Our understanding today of the world is, at least as far as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is concerned, leaving aside all the sects and every, individual who thinks they know everything about everything or wants to reinterpret the Quran according to modern times, leaving those people aside, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the main body of Islam, the understanding is the same as was the understanding of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, radiallahu anhum. And we have maintained the tradition that way for a reason. It's not ignorance the way people like to put it out. Oh, we're stuck in the past. Oh, we're stuck in medieval interpretations. No, that interpretation that is from that time period is so that the understanding is the same and consistent throughout the ages. The ages themselves can undergo various transformations, but the understanding remains as it had been held by the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. We can add to that because knowledge is cumulative in our tradition. In reality, actually, the haqiqiyah of knowledge is cumulative as far as human civilization is concerned. So we can add more to what the previous generation of scholars came up with, but we do not negate or override or write off or try to reinvent the wheel. To say, no, modern times now, AI, we have to figure out a new kind of fiqh here. No, we don't do that. So it doesn't go through that either. Which must of necessity be left vague and open-minded for future change and alteration in line with paradigms that change in correspondence with changing circumstances. But what he means by necessity is that each of those paradigm shifts never reached a final conclusion. They were always ambiguous and vague as to what would come next after that in the process of that human evolution that the West tries to propagate. So the Dark Ages, it was ambiguous as to which direction it would go to. Likewise, when it came to the Renaissance, what it would transform into, and then what the next age transforms into. So even right now, when you look at the conversations that are taking place around many of the transformations and advancements in their world, the discussions are really open-ended. It's speculative as to, are we headed towards a technocratic society, or are we headed towards a transhumanistic world, or are we headed towards this? And then some are in favor of that, looking forward to it, and then others are objecting to that. So this debate continues among them. They keep on quarreling because neither of them have a unified worldview. Each one has their own perspective, their nadra, as he started off with. And what he's trying to establish here, just to give you an idea, is that the worldview of Islam is a universal worldview. It doesn't matter what race, what religion, what ethnic background, what tribe, family, which part of the world, what nationality. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're male or female, as Allah says it in that ayah. And the ayah is there. I think it's Surah Al-Rum. I keep forgetting which surah it is in. Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum 'inda Allah atqakum. See, we created you as in male and female, and we placed you in tribes and nations so that you can understand that when it comes to nobility and when it comes to honor, when it comes to virtue, with Allah are those who are righteous. Piety, righteousness, that's what determines the overall. It doesn't matter where you come from. Your understanding of what is true and what is right is universal. And Islam will provide you with that universal understanding. So it is not a worldview that undergoes a dialectical process of transformation repeated through the ages. It's not something that we discuss every time. Oh no, now we need to update the system. No, it's not something that goes through that. From thesis to antithesis, then synthesis, with elements of each of these stages in the process of being assimilated into the other, such as a worldview based upon a system of thought that was originally God-centered, then gradually became God-world-centered, and is now world-centered, and perhaps shifting again to form a new thesis in the dialectical process, which would be the anti-God-centered. From God-centered, which was a theological worldview, and then it became God-world-centered, which was a more metaphysical worldview. It's where the sparks of science and philosophy really took root in Western civilization. And then it became world-centered, which is where you see now the industrial into the technological age coming in. And what's anticipated after that? It's the antichrystal age. That's what we are. All philosophers will agree on that. If they are sensible philosophers, will agree that that's really the next stage in the paradigm shifts. Again, he wrote this 25 years ago. So I think right now he would probably confirm it if he was to rewrite or update this book. May Allah bless him. Such a worldview changes in line with ideological ages characterized by a predominance of the influence of particular and opposing systems of thought, advocating different interpretations of worldview and value systems like that which have occurred and will continue to occur in the history of the cultural, religious, and intellectual tradition of the West. There have not been, in the history of the cultural, religious, and intellectual tradition of Islam, distinct ages characterized by a preponderance of a system of thought based upon materialism or idealism, supported by attendant methodological approaches and positions like empiricism, rationalism, realism, nominalism, pragmatism, positivism, logical positivism, criticism, oscillating between centuries and emerging one after another right down to our time. Islam has never had any of those. Never had this dialectical conversation as to whether or not we need to transform and meet the requirement of the age, the zeitgeist, as you would put it. There have never been any of these dialectical exchanges. There have never been any guiding forces, such as any particular type of ism that would come in to say, no, we need to transform now, because you see, capitalism is the dominant, so we need to reinterpret the Sharia to fit into that. You see, none of that. Islam remains what Islam was at that time. Anyone who attempts to change it only gets humiliated. Their faces get blackened, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself said he is the one who has perfected this religion. He is the one who has sent down this revelation, and he is the one who will preserve it, so long as there are those who are sincere towards wanting that guidance. When those individuals are removed from the world, then there is no use for the guidance. The protection itself is not necessary. Then those who are remaining and who want to go astray, Allah will leave them to go astray. The representatives of Islamic thought, theologians, philosophers, metaphysicians, have all and individually applied various methods in their investigations without preponderating on any one particular method. They've subjected, they've tested it, they've used multiple sciences. Imam al-Ghazali says, I have debated with the theologians, I've debated with philosophers, logicians, I have written refutations against this. There is no field that I have not explored. And ultimately, I can find nothing. I can fully, with complete confidence, advocate for Islam as truth. He's explored, at his time, he explored every single argument for and against. Likewise, for others like Fakhruddin al-Razi, phenomenal individual, had over 70 proofs for the existence of God. At his time, he had 70 logical, argumentative proofs for the existence of God. One of the women, old women who heard that, she said, if he had 70 proof, he must have had 70 doubts. And when Fakhruddin al-Razi heard that, he said, alaykum bil iman al-ajaiz, beware the faith of the elderly. Beware the faith of those who are senior to you. They've seen life. And they've reached the end where they can affirm nothing but God as one. And such was the case with almost every scholar. Ibn Taymiyyah said, I studied all of this. In the end, at my deathbed, I realized none of it will benefit me, except La ilaha illallah. All of it was to do with this world. Every science that I studied was to apply it in this world, whether for myself or for my students or for others. In the end, I realized on my deathbed, as he's telling those who are at his deathbed, La ilaha illallah is the only thing that truly matters. And so they've exhausted all these methods, and they have agreed. It's a unanimous thing among Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that there's nothing more to really discover here. There's nothing more to come up with here as a new science or a new technique or a new way of interpreting or a new way of looking at it or a new whatever. If you attempt that, then you're trying to do something devious. They combined in all their investigations and at the same time in their persons the empirical and the rational, the deductive and the inductive methods, and affirmed no dichotomy between the subjective and the objective, so that they all affected what I would call the Tawheed methodology of knowledge. There's only one singular pathway to truth, and that is a realization that God himself is the source of all truth. There is no other pathway you can affirm. The modern world will try to establish this in contradiction. They will try to tell you, no, science, look, advancement, genetics, look, AI, artificial intelligence, look, you can take your own Quran, put it in the AI, it will give you new insights. No, there is none of that. It's already been established. It's been worked out. If you know your tradition well enough, you can affirm that. Most people will not be able to affirm that because they've been disconnected from that tradition. But if you know your tradition well enough, if you know the works of your scholars, you will be able to affirm that without doubt, with 100% certainty that it's all been worked out. Really, it's all been worked, at least in its conceptual, at least in its universals. And you can apply those universals to any particular issue or circumstance in at present of your life. So it's already been worked out that there is no dichotomy, duality between the subjective experience and the objective and the objectivity of it. Meaning that what I experience of reality, as far as my worldview being Islam is concerned, or rather the worldview of Islam, the Islamic worldview, if I was to apply that from my subjective experience of it as a Muslim, there should be no separation or distinction, contradiction between that objective truth that I want to arrive at and my subjective understanding of reality if my worldview is Islam. If your let me put it in a different way. If your worldview is Islam, then your experience of reality does not differ from your objective aim of what you want to achieve. It will guide you through your own experience, will be able to guide you through to that ultimate objective, which is akhirah. Oh, he actually has a note here, a footnote on this, on the word subjective. He says, by subjective, I mean not the popular understanding of the word, but that's what, yeah. The human soul is creative by means of perception, imagination, and intelligence. It participates in the creation and interpretation of the worlds of sense and sensible experience, of images and of intelligible forms. Subjective here is something not opposed to what is objective, but complementary to it. Remember, Islam does not accept duality. We don't have duality. And if there is a kind of a dual comparison, it is complementary to each other, meaning the two things that you are separating as dual are actually complementing each other. Where was it? nor have there been in Islam historical periods that can be characterized as classical, then medieval, then modern, and now purportedly shifting again to postmodern. And he, again, 25 years ago, most philosophers would argue that we are already in a postmodern society. As of, well, basically 2022, 23. And some would even argue as of 2020, with the Circus 19, which created a kind of a catalyst for an incredible socioeconomic and political transformation of society that has basically put us into now a postmodern period. We're no longer modern now; we're actually in a postmodern period, because it created things like the post-literate society that we spoke about, whereby people, they can recognize words, but their ability of comprehension has greatly deteriorated. Again, also speaking about the generation that has arisen from that, like what they're calling Gen Z, right? Another very idiotic thing, where they're so proud of themselves, the Gen Z society. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that. Or the 2022-23 period with the introduction of language models in artificial intelligence. But essentially, either one that you pick, we are already now in a postmodern society. So Islam does not have that. Islam does not have these different periods, like classical period, medieval period, Enlightenment period, industrial period. Islam does not have that. Or at least, I mean, the Muslims may have gone through these periods historically as the world transformed, but Islam itself has not undergone any transformation that is tethered to any of these periods. Nor critical events between the medieval and the modern experienced as a renaissance and an enlightenment. Proponents of shifts in systems of a thought involving changes in the fundamental elements of the worldview and value system may say that all forms of cultures must experience such shifts. Otherwise, in the process of interaction with changing circumstances, they exhaust themselves and become uncreative and petrified. I think this is more of a dignified language that he's using here, but to express it in a more sarcastic way. This is essentially proponents of those who make the case, or those who try to argue that Islam needs to be reinterpreted to fit modern times. Otherwise, we risk becoming obsolete. Like there was that one question or post that was made about that individual who, quote unquote, forwarded an argument, right, for the use of AI and the benefits. And his argument, like first, as we identified, first of all, his argument was not even his own argument. It was AI generated himself. So he couldn't even be bothered to write it himself. So it was basically AI trying to make a case for itself in Islam. But in that argument, he tried to put points such as, the calligraphers became obsolete because they brought in the printing press, or some stupid nonsense like that. Not even worth keeping in memory. But his core argument was what? That if we don't adapt AI now, we're going to become obsolete. Oh, these Western nations, they're going to become more advanced than us. And so, the mistakes that we made in the past, we'll be making the same mistake again. Completely nonsensical argument. Completely nonsensical argument. Proponents of shift, I'm going to read that section again just so you get it. Proponents of shifts in systems of a thought involving changes in the fundamental elements of the worldview and value system may say that all forms of cultures must experience such shifts. Otherwise, in the process of interaction with changing circumstances, they exhaust themselves and become uncreative and petrified. They argue it this way, that you have to change, otherwise you risk becoming obsolete, you risk becoming, a backward culture. So what their argument is that we are a backward culture because we are not adapting modern systems and modern ways of thinking and modern ways of life. Which really, if they were to think about it, it's not really modern, it's actually Western. Because we are modern right now, we are existent all. This is our modern age, collectively. Modern does not belong to a particular civilization. We are all modern because the meaning of modern is contemporary. It's present. It's the here and now. So we're all modern. The distinction here is now, the argument they're trying to make is to embrace the Western way of life. Otherwise, we risk becoming, quote unquote, obsolete and backward. So he counter-argues this. But this is only true, but this is true only in the experience and consciousness of civilizations whose systems of thought and value have been derived from cultural and philosophical elements aided by the science of their times. This is only true. It is true, it's not false, that you do risk becoming obsolete, but it's only true if you are a civilization whose transformation and whose worldview is derived from your cultural experience and the science of your time. If your worldview is derived from that, then yes, you do need to change. Otherwise, you become obsolete. Why? Because those things themselves are changed. They are subject to change. They are artificial. They are artificial constructs of this world and are hence subject to change. And so science keeps changing all the time. And culture itself keeps changing accordingly as technology also changes. So yeah, you do need to update yourself as far as that's concerned. But that's where that stops. That's not the worldview of Islam. That's your worldview of the world. That's your worldly worldview, not your Islamic worldview. Islam is not a form of culture. And its system of thought projecting its vision of reality and truth and the system of value derived from it are not merely derived from cultural and philosophical elements aided by science, but one whose original source is revelation, confirmed by religion, affirmed by intellectual and intuitive principles. This is his thesis. All this that he's been talking about, this is his foundational premise. Islam is a revealed religion. It's not an arbitrary construct. It doesn't come from culture. It's not driven by culture. It's not sustained by culture. It's not sustained by science and technology, by any form of political movement or political system or any kind of ism, philosophy. It doesn't, none of that. None of that. Islam is a revealed religion. So this is your foundational premise. If you're going to venture inquiry into anything in reality, you have to do it from this angle, from this perspective, from this lens. Your worldview needs to be this. That's what he's saying. Your worldview needs to be that Islam is a revealed religion. Revelation is from Allah. Islam ascribes to itself the truth of being truly revealed, of being a truly revealed religion, perfected from the very beginning, requiring no historical explanation and evaluation in terms of the place it occupied and the role it played within a process of development. Islam itself is aware of its revealed status. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum. On this day, I have perfected for you your religion. Wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati. And I have fulfilled my favor upon you of giving you this as a way of realization. Wa raditu lakumul Islam deena. And I have set for you now Islam as the religion. Its source, its point of origin is Allah. Islam, unlike what you would call Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism or any other religion that you look at in the world, even the name itself, Islam, is not something that we made up ourselves. It is Allah Himself who named it. We only ascribe to that same name as Muslims. It's a derivative with the meme that comes after it. Al-Muslim is the one who aslama, right? He, Allah, is the one who named it as Islam. We only ascribe to that. by name. We didn't make that name up. The source itself is divinity. All the essentials of the religion, the name, the faith and practice, the rituals, the creed and system of belief were given by revelation and interpreted and demonstrated by the Prophet in his words and model actions, not from cultural tradition, which necessarily must flow in the stream of historicism. Culture is going to go through history. Religion, true religion, does not abide by religion, does not abide by history, does not originate from history, nor does it conform to history or historical interpretation. So here now I will highlight a fallacy which he does not highlight. And this is the fallacy of false term. When people say, oh, we have to reinterpret the religion. No, actually, what you're doing is not reinterpreting. Interpretation is something that we do, and we do reinterpret every generation. Every generation of scholars reinterprets. Reinterprets in what way? It's based off the circumstances that they have to deal with as the world transforms, and it does transform because the ages undergo different kinds of changes, technological or political or economical. And so each generation needs to understand how they will apply the ordinance of God in their way of life. And so interpretation is done. Reinterpretation is also done without negating what came before, without negating or overriding the interpretations that were done before. But from the very beginning, from the Prophet ﷺ himself, continuing onwards till today, the revelation has been interpreted. The Prophet, he did not originate the revelation. It was given to him, and then he interpreted it. And then the companions interpreted, and on and on. Now, those who talk about, oh, we have to reinterpret to fit the modern, thing, they're not reinterpreting. This is the zayghun. Fi qulubihim zayghun. The perversion in their hearts. Wa fi qulubihim maradun. The disease in their hearts. This is the perversion by the usage of false terms. Because interpretations are valid principle of religion. What they want to do is redefine it. They want to change its fundamental definition. Interpretation is valid in religion. Definition is not. We don't define what Islam is. Allah is the one who has established what Islam is. We hear, we obey, we accept that, and we follow it. We don't define it. They want to redefine that definition that has been established by revelation. They want to redefine that. And this is why you'll find a lot of these notions, they will use these excuses or these premises like, oh, look at this tafsir, it's so outdated, it's medieval, we have to negate that. We have to redo this because it has to be reinterpreted to understand in the modern sense. Because now we have technology that explains that. See, now we didn't have embryology at that time. Now we have embryology, so we can explain that now. This is a reversal that they want to try and do, to use modern ideologies to redefine what religion is. And they'll come up with all kinds of really perverse bases to do that. Oh, tafsir, we can't rely on it because like this and like that, and this particular one, look at this interpretation, it makes no sense at all. So we have to remove that completely. Get rid of the tradition entirely. Get rid of the tafsir tradition entirely. Or they'll come up and say, oh, Bukhari was 100 years, he came after like 100 years, after the Prophet. How can we verify that he had the right in 100 years? They're like this hadith is fabricated in Sahih Bukhari. So if this is fabricated, what about this one and what about that one? We can't rely on hadith. Cancel that. Go straight now to the Quran. And then they start reinterpreting it or redefining it, which is what their perversion is making them do. And you will notice one thing, that they will always go for ayat that are ambiguous. Amazing. exactly what the Quran says they do, that's exactly what they do. They'll always look for ayat that have ambiguity in them, so that they can find an interpretation or a redefinition that fits their aim or their worldview. Okay, let me just finish this section up until where he's put the footnote, because you have to kind of find a proper place to stop with him. Otherwise, you end up breaking the train of thought. And then we'll take a break and then do some questions and answers, inshallah. So he where was it? Right, the religion of Islam was conscious of its own of its own identity from the time of its revelation. It was already aware as a religion what it is. It did not need someone to define it. It did not need anyone to come and say, what is this religion? Is it like this? Is it like that? It did not need this. And this is why if you look at the hadith of Jibril, it establishes for you the proper epistemology. When Jibril came and asked the Prophet, Akhbirni anil Islam, inform me, tell me about Islam. The Prophet ﷺ did not give a definition. Because logic would dictate when somebody asks you to tell me about something, you start with defining it. He didn't give a definition of Islam. Tell me about Iman. He didn't define Iman. Tell me about Ihsan. Then he gave a definition. Because that requires definition. Otherwise, anyone can go whichever way and claim to be, I'm a spiritualist, or I'm an ascetic, or I'm a monk, or, I'm like this. Yeah, you can go in any direction you want. What is it? You have to define it. But what is Islam? Does not need a definition. All you need to know is what Islam requires from you. Testimony, prayer, fast, abstinence, charity, alms, pilgrimage, that's all you need to know. You don't need to know the definition. Allah has defined it. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. I have defined it. I've completed the religion for you. You don't need to add anything to it. You don't need to redefine it. You don't need to adapt it elsewhere. You don't need to do it again. I've already done it for you. All you have to do is apply it. Take it the way it is and apply it. That's all you have to do. It's application. That's the main point. So the religion of Islam was conscious of its own identity from the time of its revelation. When it appeared on the stage of world history, Islam was already mature, needing no process of growing up to maturity. It was already complete. And that's also to do with language. Right? He's going to come to that later when he talks about the language of Islam. Revealed religion can only be that which knows itself from the very beginning. And that self-knowledge comes from the revelation itself, not from history. The so-called development in the religious traditions of mankind cannot be applied to Islam. For what is assumed to be a developmental process is, in the case of Islam, only a process of interpretation and elaboration. So every scholar that comes in is not giving you something new, is not providing you with newer insights. He is not telling you what a revelation is. He's only interpreting what is in front of him. Every scholar, no matter how ranking he is or she is only interpreting it for you and telling you, this is what I think your Lord expects from you. I have studied, I have certain understanding. You've asked me, this is what I think your Lord expects from you. This is what I think he's saying. Wallahu a'lam. Allah himself knows best what he is saying. I think this is what he's saying, but there's an authority that goes with it. It's not just a regular Musa, Abdullah, who, okay, I think I know now. Okay, I have the dictionary now. I have Google Translate, so I can just put the ayah, they get the translation. Now I know what it's saying. I think it's saying this. No, you have to have a certain, that's why you're a scholar. A scholarly authority means you have studied all the sciences. You know there is ma'loom that is with you for you to then venture thought into the majhul, which is unknown, to derive and to come back with an interpretation that is not known before. So there's an authority that goes with that. But every scholar, every individual does that. So even scholars do not dictate what revelation is. They only interpret what it is. Only a process of interpretation and elaboration. This is your ta'wil and your tafsir. That's what they're doing. That's what we are doing as far as revelation is concerned. We are not dictating what revelation is. We don't determine, nor do we define what revelation is. We only take what has been provided, and then we either do ta'wil or we do tafsir, and in most cases we do both. Which must of necessity occur in alternating generations of believers of different nations, which refer back to the unchanging source. And he's referring to the circumstances. Every age, every group, every location, they all have different circumstances. People who are on the road have different circumstances from people who are settled. People who are settled in the city have a different set of circumstances than people who are settled in a village or a town or in the wilderness. So each circumstances are different. That's the nature of the world. And so they will alternate. These interpretations will differ based on each individual circumstances, but it is only the circumstantial application that changes. The source itself does not change. That's what he's trying to establish here. That from the very beginning, revealed religion is only that which knows itself from the very beginning. That self-knowledge comes from revelation itself, not from history. Paradigm shifts do not determine what religion is. And the comparative that academics make are really comparatives to do with Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and these type of, which are not religions per se. They're more ideologies. They're not revealed religions. They're not. Christianity is not a revealed religion. It's an arbitrary construction based off of a source that is revealed. But then that source they've cut themselves off from the source entirely. Same is true for Judaism, for the Jews. Yeah, they have the physical text, but they have cut themselves, they severed themselves from the source of the revelation. And so now what they have is an arbitrary construct. They've just filled up the gaps themselves. Oh, okay, we're supposed to pray like this, we're supposed to do this, these are the rites, these are the rituals, these are the ranks, everything like that. And the same is true for others. But Islam does not fit into any of those categories. Because Islam is itself, from its very conception, from its point of origin, it is a revelation. It is a revealed religion. It's not an arbitrary construct. So the so-called development in the religious traditions of mankind cannot be applied to Islam. You can't make the comparative. Yeah, Judaism has got a 3,000, 4,000-year-old tradition. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's not the criterion. Its development cannot be applied to Islam. Hinduism, far older tradition, I think 6,000 years, they have 5,000 years, cannot be applied to Islam. You cannot use those, oh, you see, these religions underwent transformation like that, and that one underwent transformation, therefore Islam should also undergo transformation. No, it's not the same. It's apples and oranges. At the very basic of it, Islam is not the same as any other religion. Why I'm emphasizing this, because that question that was asked by, was it Nur Fadila who had asked that question, if I remember, on the group. About what is religion in the true sense of the word. Because, yeah, there is a true sense of the word religion. And then there is what is arbitrarily constructed. If you look, you can try this. Google the word religion and look for the definition. You'll see definitions attached to that, like, the worship of some superhuman being or something of a supernatural order. This is their, comic book style definition that they provide. That's what they regard as Judaism, Christianity. It's like that. They see it like that. But when it comes to Islam, they have a problem. They have a problem. They cannot pinpoint Islam. It cannot be pinpointed. They have tried generations of the Orientalists writing. Some of them writing, just vulgar descriptives. of Islam and the Muslims. And even then, they cannot come to a valid, an absolute conclusion as to what Islam is. Because it's not of this world. You cannot define it based off of anything in this world. So when people, even Muslims also, you have to be smart about this. When what is Islam? Oh, Islam is a religion of peace. No, it's not a religion of peace. Where'd you come up with that? Does it say so in the Quran? Does the Quran says, Al-Islamu dinu salam? Does it say that? Allah has given you what Islam is. Now you need to understand that and then explain it. But you don't want to understand this. You come up with your own understandings, your own definitions. Islam is a religion of peace. No, Islam is not. Look at what the book of Allah said. Look at what he has explained. He alone can explain it because it's his religion. He has sent it down. He has revealed it. He has perfected it and he protects it. Islam does not need you to defend it. It does not need you to protect it. Protect the Muslims. Don't worry about Islam. Protect the Muslims. People want to defend Islam. Why are you defending Islam? Islam doesn't need you to defend it. Muslims need you to defend them. Defend the Muslims. Which refer back to that unchanging source, which is the source itself, which is divinity. So I think we'll stop here on this footnote, and inshallah in the next session, I'll probably go into no, actually, let me finish this. Let me finish it because the argument is continuing, but then he comes to that. Actually, that second portion, which is where he begins with on page 7, the nature of God understood in Islam. That's the important portion there. Yeah. So let me just finish this page and a half here, till where he says, since we affirm the Quran to be the speech of God. So he just to continue, I'm just going to read through quickly. I won't spend much more time on this now to explain. I think he's made his points. So he says, as such, the worldview of Islam is characterized by an authenticity and a finality that points to what is ultimate, and it projects a view of reality and truth. The charger on this. I put it on this, the charger. Yeah, you can just stop that, it's fine. That's it. Just take the charger from this one. So let me just read that again. As such, the worldview of Islam is characterized by an authenticity and a finality that points to what is ultimate, and it projects a view of reality and truth that encompasses existence and life all together in total perspective, whose fundamental elements are permanently established. These are, to mention the most salient ones, the nature of God, of revelation, that is the Quran, of his creation, of man and the psychology of the human soul, of knowledge, of religion, of freedom, of values and virtues, of happiness, all of which together with the key terms and concepts that they unfold have profound bearing upon our ideas about change, development, and progress. And so his point here is that for you to understand why is it important to cultivate that as the worldview? Because Islam does encompass all of that. The things that are being debated by intellectuals and by academics today as the ultimate understanding of the human being and his purpose in this world, Islam already encompasses that within its language. You know, even without you having to get into the discussions that we are discussing right now as a science of it, that language of Islam itself already encompasses all those. The nature of God, the nature of the human being, psychology, the nature of virtue, of freedom, of happiness, all of these things, they're already part of Islam. So all of which together with the key terms and concepts that they unfold have profound bearing upon our ideas about change, development, and progress. Once you embrace that, they will cultivate your thought in such a way as would be aligned with revelation, and then that would become your worldview, and then you would then cultivate your world accordingly. You would cultivate your reality accordingly. And so, I mean, this is where we really see the contrast between the early Muslims and the more modern Muslims. Our cultivation of reality is really it differs entirely. Whether you want to look at poetry, you want to look at art, you want to look at architecture, you want to look at governance, economics, education, every aspect of human society, there's a contrast between how the early Muslims built their society and how we've built our society. It's because their worldview was defined by Islam. Our worldview is not defined by Islam. Our worldview is defined by Western ideologies, by secular ideologies. Whether we engage in them actively or passively, they do have an influence on us. Much of what you see in the Arab world is defined by things like Marxism, and they don't even realize it. You know, much of what you see in the Asian subcontinent is defined by communism, and they don't even realize it. So, these are real things, and still people don't want to, understand what is it that's driving things that you do. Just stop and question. Why are you dressing in a certain way? Why are you talking in a certain way? Where is that coming from as a source? Is it coming from, which worldview is it coming from? I propose in this introduction to give you only a gist, to give a gist only of some of these fundamental elements of the worldview of Islam. A comprehensive statement of their nature is already set forth in the chapters of this book. So I'll give you like a gist, like a comprehension of all this, and then he'll expand it for you in the rest of the chapters. It is these fundamental elements of our worldview that we maintain to be permanently established that modernity is challenging. This is the real enemy now. Modernity is challenging our worldview. It's got no issue with the way we pray salah or the way we fast. They don't care. You want to go hungry for 30 days, it's up to you. They don't care about that. You want to believe in some arbitrary created God, that's fine. They don't really care. What they're challenging is that worldview, is how you see that world, how you see reality. They have a problem with that because you don't see eye to eye. You don't see the way they see. And so now they have a problem because they need to establish their ideology, which is their secular, godless society. And you are challenging that with a worldview that they cannot arbitrarily redefine, no matter how much they try. They can try and corrupt the minds of the Muslims, but they cannot corrupt Islam itself. They succeeded in doing so to Christianity and Judaism and every other religion. They cannot do that to Islam. Now they can corrupt the Muslims, but they can't corrupt Islam itself. And this is what they have a problem with. Yeah, it is these fundamental elements of our worldview that we maintain to be permanently established that modernity is challenging, seeing that the shifting systems of thought that have brought modernity forth from the womb of history were fathered by the forces of secularization as a philosophical ideology. Fundamentally, every transformation you see in the world has been fathered by secularization. It has originated from the womb of history, meaning it has been nurtured by historical development and progress, but its source point, its seed, is the father is secularization, to make a worldly order, to establish an order in which divinity is completely negated and completely removed from the hearts and minds and even thought and even inkling of there being a God at all. Not just negated on paper, but completely removed, so that you have a complete generation of mankind as a whole that does not even have the word God in its vocabulary. But as a matter of fact, modernity or postmodernity has itself no coherent vision to offer that could be described as a worldview. They have nothing that could be anything coherent that they can establish or offer as a comprehensive worldview to say this is it in its entirety. It's all fragmented. It's all divided. Every part of the world, every group has got a different perspective, has got a different. You look even in individual countries, you've got opposing forces. You've got a liberal worldview, you've got a conservative worldview. You have a democratic worldview, you have a Republican worldview. These are political. You've got a capitalist worldview, you've got a communist worldview, you've got this Isto, you've got that Isto. Each East is its own thing. And there's nothing coherent among them at all. You cannot put them all together. He gives an allegory here. If we could strike even a superficial similitude between a worldview and a picture depicted in a jigsaw puzzle. If you were to take a jigsaw puzzle and say, look at this, this is how their worldview is, then the jigsaw of modernity is not only far from depicting any coherent picture, but also the very pieces to form such a picture do not fit. Not only does it not have a proper picture, the jigsaw puzzle of modernity, the pieces themselves do not fit with each other. It's a hodgepodge. It's like you've got stones and marbles and chips of wood and all kinds of things all in there, and they're trying to sort of make something out of it to say, oh, look, no, it looks nice this way. If you push this one here and you're putting it here, it looks better this way. That's all. Their entirety is, their focus and thought is all around that. That's why they have all these debates going on all the time. Is this real? Is this not real? Is this subjective? Is it objective? Is this legal? Is this illegal? Can we do it like this? Can we do it like that? You see? If you look at legal systems in many of these countries, based off of these constitutions, they are so complex, they're ridiculously, it's just one law after another law. By the time you get to the 5th, 6th amendment of that law, it loops back in on itself contradictory. People get so frustrated when they go to court or they go to any municipal proceeding or anything, and they just find this contradiction. It loops them back in on, they have no clue where they're going or what they're doing, whatever, this thing that they're designing. And this is why, by its very nature, the modern civilization is headed towards a dystopia. It's not headed towards a utopia. They want to take it towards a utopia. If you don't know what that means, a utopia is like absolute happiness. Humanity is just absolutely happy. Everything is nice and wonderful. It's basically paradise. But in reality, it's headed towards a utopia. And this is why every art form that the West itself produces, whether it's in film or in novel, like in book, and a projection of civilization in the future is never utopian. It's always dystopian. It's post-apocalyptic. It's or the human race is about to be extinct, or the world is ending, or it's always a dystopian perspective. You cannot conceive of a utopian worldview, of a utopian world from their worldview. It's just not possible. It's impossible to envision absolute happiness from their worldview, because it's a hodgepodge of conflicting ideas and contrasting notions. The jigsaw puzzle does not have any coherent picture, and the pieces themselves do not fit with each other. This is not to mention postmodernity, which is already undoing all the pieces because they know it's hodgepodge. So they're taking it all apart. We need to fix this. We need to re-envision this now. We need to go back to the drawing board. That's why we want to advance AI, because AI is now going to solve all the problems of modernity. AI will solve the climate crisis. AI will solve the Middle East crisis. AI will solve the resources crisis. AI will solve the ocean levels rising. AI will solve the population crisis, the food crisis, the hunger, the drought, every problem that we have created ourselves to date with every single transformation through our history. In this bid for secularization as humanity now has to be fixed by another arbitrary program that we have created. This is the mindset, this is the mentality of this. When you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, in those first 20 ayat, you will see their description here. Deaf, dumb, and blind. Deaf, summun, bukmun, umyun. Going round and round in circles. The blind leading the blind. No true worldview can come into focus when a grand-scale ontological system to project it is denied. And when there is a separation between truth and reality, between truth and values, these fundamental elements act as integrating principles that place our systems of meaning and standards of life and values in coherent order as a unified system forming the worldview. And the supreme principle of true reality that is articulated by these fundamental elements is focused on knowledge of the nature of God as revealed in the Quran. This is why there is coherency in Islam. The point he's trying to make here is, and this is, by the way, his fundamental premise, another fundamental premise of this entire book is that Islam is the only true religion. He is going to, in those pages between number 7 and 10, which was actually what I was supposed to be doing today, he's actually going to make a case against perennialism. He's going to argue against the idea of there being truth in all these other sources. He's basically saying here that a coherent worldview can only arise if that worldview itself originates from a source that is not of the world. Meaning that the world cannot explain itself. It's a closed-loop system. I cannot ask an object to tell me what it is. I have to discern what it is. But that knowledge does not come from the object. It comes from a predisposition, something that divinity has already placed within me that I can use to discern its reality. And this was Adam when he was created. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, and God placed in Adam, thrust into him, all the names, conceptual understandings, derivatives, language itself. So the source itself of understanding this world must be from outside this world. And Islam as the world view, this is what it emphasizes. Then you come to understand that truth comes from Allah. That's what the Muslim understands. Truth comes from Allah. And he so by this understands that what's happening in reality is not because of reality itself, is because God has ordained it to happen. All the problems and the difficulties and the issues that we see, whether it's from nature or from human nature, meaning wars and conflicts and political discord, whatever it might be, for whatever aim it might be, the Muslim's worldview, which is the worldview of Islam, that lens shows you that this is happening by the will of Allah. And that changes your understanding. It fundamentally changes your understanding of what you need to do about it and how much you're supposed to do and to what extent are you going to involve yourself in that. A lot of Muslims today, with all their protests and flag waving and all these things, yeah, within the system, it might be commendable. Within the system, we might give you praise. Yeah, you're doing a good thing. Stand up for what is right. Definitely. But what is driving that action? In the Kimya Sadak, Imam al-Ghazali says, if I was to ask you, do you know yourself? And you say, yeah, I know myself. Then you don't actually know yourself. You know your physicality, your likes and dislikes. But what's driving those actions? You don't know that yet. What's bringing about those actions? What is the ideology that's driving that? That ideology, that worldview is based off of this jigsaw puzzle that he's referring to here. This jigsaw puzzle, you will actually find, if you crucially examine yourself, you'll find that you actually fit in one of these categories, these worldly, arbitrary philosophies. You'll find yourself fitting into one of these. And if you're honest with yourself, you will accept that your worldview is not actually the worldview of Islam, because you're arguing within arbitrary fields. You're debating with each other within arbitrary fields. For you, it's a matter of Israel-Palestine, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's the framework that you've been presented with. So your argument is within that framework, fighting for the rights of Palestine, for the rights of Palestinian. This is why when politicians will come onto the stage at the UN, Muslim and make announcements, or the country of France has finally agreed to accept, recognize the state of Israel, Palestine. And so Muslims will start getting excited because of that. Forgive my fake French accent. I was trying to mimic the, the prime minister when he made that statement, because it was such a ridiculous thing in the, his expression, like he's doing something so profound that's worthy of history, like his name is going to go down in history as the one who recognized the state of Palestine. Thank you very much, but no thanks. We don't need your recognition. But Muslims who are clapping and alhamdulillah, subhanallah, you're doing so because your ideology, your worldview is within that framework. Because you've been trained by the same ideology to have a conflict in there. Even though you're not involved in the conflict, you have to pick a side. So long as those forces that be can keep you occupied in the worldly, they can continue doing what they want to do to bring about the world they want to bring. And so you're conflicting here. Your time is being used up in this framework. Whether you're going to sit there and watch news clip after news clip, or you're going to scroll through your Facebook or your Instagram looking through video after video, or you're going to go out for 2, 3 hours, 4 hours protesting in the street, whatever it is that you're going to do, it's driven by a certain worldview. Now you have to question yourself and be honest. Is that the worldview of Islam? Or is it some other worldview that you only think is Islam, but is not Islam? It's only Islamic because it is based off of waqi'iyah. It's not based off of haqiqah. It's based off of the phenomena. It is realistic. It's not real. That worldview is not real. It is arbitrary. Let's stop here, actually, because I see the sentence that begins on page 5, the very last. The sentence actually begins with the nature of God as revealed in Islam. So he's now going to formulate another argument, and you can see how his sentences are leading, and each paragraph, I mean, this paragraph was what? This was one paragraph that spanned over 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. SubhanAllah. And so that was that whole paragraph spanning 4 pages was an argument by itself. It's a set of argument. So he's provided you with the basis. He said, this is worldview. Now, what does that worldview entail is what he's going to explain now. He's going to begin with the nature of God, Tawheed first. And then he's going to explain other things like the language of Islam, because the language of that worldview differs fundamentally from every other language. And he's not going to be talking about the Arabic language. He's going to be talking about the language set that Islam carries, that Islam talks about, that language set. And so here again is a criteria for yourself to determine whether or not are you actually following that worldview or not. He's also going to talk about a few other things like political structures. He's going to be talking about truth. Then he's going to address perennialism as far as truth is concerned. So inshallah, we'll come to that in another session. We'll have to stop here. I thought I might be able to, but there's so much that you can expand from this. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. I just need to stretch my legs. Then we can do some questions and answers. please keep your questions ready because we did go over time, and so we'll need to move faster with this. Jazakumullah khairan. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let's start, inshallah, if there are any questions from anyone here also. Yeah.
Sister Hina, you can ask your question, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, first of all, thank you for introducing this book to us. You have really, thrown us into very deep waters. And the rope is very thin because, like you said, it's a very thin line between what we conclude and the Sharia and the fiqh part of it. We have to be very careful. So my question is, firstly, how are we going to go about this book? What kind of sessions will you take? Because this is a big book, around 300 pages.
Yeah. I don't think we'll be able to do like a complete, like a full reading as in session by session. So what I think would be a better course is like, as you guys are reading it, when you come across sections that are confusing, or if you have any questions pertaining to some of the arguments or concepts that is there, then we can build like sessions around that and then expand, or I can help explain, because I studied this book with a teacher, and that's really the difference. I think that's here, because I studied this with Dr. Omar Qureshi from Zaytuna when he taught a course here in Turkey when he had come for a Rihla program. So I had the benefit of actually understanding what arguments Dr. Naqib was making, and then at the same time the benefit of asking him questions myself. But I don't think we'll be able to do a full reading, because if we do that, I think we may end up having almost 100 sessions just going through every single section. So inshallah, if as you have questions that come up, you can just post them in the group itself, and then I can maybe try and accumulate them into a single setting, into a single session, inshallah, and then we can do a reading of certain sections. So the question you had asked before about pages 7 to 10, which is what I wanted to do today, but then I thought, let me just backtrack a little bit, because that will actually set the premise, because you have to go step by step with him. Each thing is connected to the next thing, and then next thing, and the next thing. So inshallah, in the next session, we'll do pages. We stopped at page 5. So inshallah, I'll try in the next session to do from page 5 to, let's say, page 10 or 11, to answer both the question that was asked regarding religion and spiritualism and esotericism and all that, as well as the other question that you had with regards to metaphysics and the argument that he provides in those pages. Does that make sense?
Yes, Ustad, thank you. And I have just one question for today. I just keep on circling around this term ontological. So even in this page 5, near the last thing, there is like no true worldview can come into focus when a grand scale ontological system, without a grand scale ontological system to project it. So in simple words, can you just explain what this ontological system is?
Yeah. Yes. So you have basically 3 levels of thought, and these 3 levels of thought correspond to those 3 fundamental questions: what, how, and why. There's actually 5 fundamental questions. The 3 are to do with the thought itself, which is to do with now what you would explore in metaphysics. And then the other 2 are what we explore in physics. So the other 2 are when and where, which are to do with time and space. And so we explore the cosmos, planets, stars, all the measurement systems, gravity, laws of the physical universe, time and space, or space-time as Einstein tried to place it as a one singular concept, in which he tried to come up with a grand unifying theory that would explain all the concepts in a singular theory, still a pursuit in physics. So that's to do with those two questions of when and where. Now, these other three questions are what we explore in metaphysics: what, how, and where. And they are hierarchical. In each level of that thought are within themselves those three questions. So the three levels are logos, which is to do with the actual text or language itself, and which the primary instrument is logic. The field of study that would be applied there is logic, and that's the starting point. And so within logic, we have those three questions: what, how, and why. And that's the causal domain. That's where we will explore causality. And so when we studied the science of logic, we spoke about reasons, for example. We spoke about causes. There's the first cause or the primary cause. There's the formal cause. And so all these are part of that logos. Then you've got the ontos, which is the next level in metaphysical thought. So where the first level looks at the question, what is it, which is quiddity, which he has a chapter on that. The next level, which is ontos, will ask, what is it really? So logic will examine waqa'iyah, but ontology will try to arrive at haqiqiyah. And that's what he's referring to. We can examine the outward of things logically and come to logical understandings, but that's just waqa'iyah. That's just one level. It's not limited to that. If we want truth, we have to go further than that. We have to go deeper into ontology now to understand what is it really, what is its nature, what is its origin, what is its source, all of those things. What is its essence? What is its driving force? So we can talk about actions. So in this case, for example, if you want to examine it in a different way, another example, actions will pertain to logos. Intentions will pertain to ontos. The intention is the ontology, whereas the action can be logically analyzed. And then the third stage is teleology, which is the purpose. Teleology is to do with the purpose of something. That everything has a purpose and a reason for existence. And that reason is above and beyond the physical and the metaphysical. It's beyond that. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has determined for each and everything that he has created, why he has created it, what purpose it has to fulfill. And this is why Dr. Naqib is saying that there is no duality here when we look at, as far as dunya and akhirah are concerned, are not dual, they are more complementary to each other, because what you do in the logical sense of reality, this outward reality, must ultimately complement the nature of your being, your fitrah. It has to complement that, which then has to complement the purpose of your being, which is your final destination, your return back to your Lord, the day of judgment in which you'll be held accountable. So this is the worldview of Islam, encompasses all of that. That's what ontology entails. It's really to do with the nature of things. Did you get that? Did you understand that?
Yes. So how is the modern system, it doesn't have an ontology because it doesn't believe in God, or it doesn't believe in its purpose?
Yeah, it doesn't believe in God, so that is eliminated. And then what they say is that things don't have a fundamental nature. That's essentially their premise. The modern system says that things do not have a fundamental nature. Everything is just causal and effectual. So if you were to ask about the origin of the human being, because they've already removed the ontology from there, they will not argue for something like fitrah, for example, or soul, or consciousness as something being of a higher order or from a different dimension. They will examine it in a causal effectual chain. And that's where the theory of evolution comes in. You see, this led to this, led to this, led to this, like that. They only argue it in terms of logic and rationality. They don't look at what is the fundamental nature of the human being, if we were to ask that question. Because they are arguing it based off of without any ontology, then, and their comparative is animalistic, right? So their conclusion is the fundamental nature of the human being is animalistic. It's eating and copulation. That's it. Consumption and copulation, which are to do with the base psychologies of the human being, your ghadabiyya and your shahwaniyya. So that's where their acceptance of truth, it stops there. And Dr. Naqib says that's to do with the waqiyya of it. So we're not debating that. That's fine. We can argue that out as to the validity of that. But there has to be more. The haqiqah of the human being is not bestial and predatory. It's not, even though we demonstrate these characteristics, that's in the waqiyya of it. But the haqiqah of it, when we examine the ontology, the nature of the human being is higher than that. There is a spiritual dimension. There is an intellectual dimension. So there is more to the reality of the human being than just what you would see in the waqiyya of it. That's where the distinction between the two worldviews arises.
Right. Thank you, sir. Jazakallah khairan. I understand now.
Yeah. Any other question?
Ustad, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Like I noticed in the today's session that when Naqib al-Attas, when you went through that text, he mentions that the word called Islamic vision, Islamic worldview. And I've noticed previously that you tend to refrain from using the word Islamic vision, Islamic psychology, or Islamic economics. Like, what is the reasoning behind that? Like, is it epistemologically wrong to be associating the word Islamic with any subject?
Yeah, I mean, he's writing it in a way that the term here is more colloquial, it's more vernacular. It's just basically how people speak. So he's putting it as Islamic physics, Islamic metaphysics, because it's a more of a distinctive term, not a fundamental term. So Christianity does have its own metaphysics. They have their own way of expressing things like love and virtue and ethics and all that. Judaism has its own, So as a matter of distinguishing ours from theirs is where we would use a term like Islamic or Islamic psychology or Islamic this. Now, if that's, as far as I would argue, is the use of that term should only be valid insofar as making that comparison, the distinction. If we are involving that, then we can use the word Islamic to distinguish ours from theirs. But if we are studying the science within its own framework, like if we were to study ilm al-nafs, then calling it Islamic psychology is really, it doesn't fit, because we're not doing a comparative study. We're studying psychology as Islam presents it. So why call it Islamic? It just becomes pointless. And, again, words have, meanings, and those meanings have certain transformations, and they present a certain worldview. Calling a certain science in Islam and studying it within the framework of Islam, giving it the term Islamic already implies that there is a comparative, and there could be validity in the comparative, meaning that there could be validity in non-Islamic psychology or non-Islamic philosophy, which we argue here that there isn't. There cannot be comparatives between the two, because if we affirm that Islam is the source of truth, then there is no comparative. We don't then create situations that accommodate or compromise, as we spoke about before, the compromising of your qibla, your objectives, in a way that accommodates other perspectives. We don't do that, no. If it is truth, then it is part of Islam. That's how we affirm it. Even if a Chinese speaks it, and he's a believer in Confucianism. Confucius was a philosopher. or he's a Buddhist, for example, that's his religion, or he's an atheist, if he says, and what he says is truth, then that's part of Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ said that wisdom is the lost property of the believer. He can claim it wherever he finds it. There is no hegemony on that. No one has ownership of it. So we don't Islamicize things. And even if in the secular sciences where we would study, if we study like medicine, we don't make the dichotomy between, oh, this is Islamic medicine, that's secular medicine. We don't make that distinction like that. If it is truth, let's say the procedure for treatment of certain diseases has been established scientifically to be true, then we accept that as part of Islam, because Islam itself represents truth. So anything that's true, whether it is in the world or it has come from the texts, revealed texts, if it is true, we affirm that it's part of Islam. There's no need to make the distinction between, no, this is Islamic and that one is not. I think that creates, the term usage just creates a kind of, it's used in a more colloquial and arbitrary form. And if we want to claim the position of being intellectuals and pursuers of knowledge and seekers of truth, then we need to first sort out the terms that we use so that our epistemology can follow a proper pathway. That's just my opinion on that. Did I make sense, or did I confuse you?
Yes, Ustad. Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. His usage over here is just colloquial, because by the way, these were not, he didn't sit down to write this book. Much of it is from lectures that he delivered. So these are like transcriptions that I think he does mention it. Yeah, I think he does mention it that, with the exception of chapter 1, which was written 20 years ago in Ramadan, the other 6 were written and completed in the months of that. Complementary, I've introduced a new theory of my own. Originally published as separate monographs in limited quantities at the request of the academic staff, which became known as the Saturday night lectures. So much of it was, it was part of his lectures that were transcribed, and so it was converted into a book. So, when you're speaking in that sense, you're speaking to people, sometimes you will use certain terms in a way that is part of the vernacular of the people. So saying Islamic worldview is part of the vernacular of the people as a way of distinction between other worldviews. That's theirs, this is ours. That's fine. But if you notice also, he doesn't keep on repeating that term over and over again. He keeps on saying our worldview, or the worldview of Islam, or as demonstrated by Islam, or as it is defined by Islam. He tends to use that, which is proper scholarly language. Because once you've already established that it's different, now we're studying it within its own framework. There's no need to bring in that vernacular term to make a comparison. Make sense?
Yes, Ustad, because the Islamization has become a common phenomenon these days. The other day I was looking into a course called Islamic Leadership. And I don't know, how do they even come up with these terms? So that's why I want to ask that question.
I know it's so ridiculous. Somebody sent me a link for an institute in South Africa that specializes in imam training, which I found to be so strange. And I looked at their curriculum. They're training imams in leadership qualities. Imams, those who would lead salah in the masjid. And I found that to be so strange, because in our tradition, an imam was a leader. Like, you didn't get the title of imam unless you had the qualities to lead a flock. So I found it so strange that he's an institute that specializes in training imams with leadership qualities. And they had all these arbitrary programs about how modern leadership is done. And I don't know. I just laughed at that thing. This what you're referring to, this Islamicization of the modern world, trying to convert what we see in modernity and trying to use that to boost Islam or to boost Muslims so that they can catch up to that, to reach at par with the way the modern standards have been set. And it being regarded as the only way that we would receive some kind of recognition or respect from the modern world, which then also, it makes us question, it begs the question, what happened to our self-respect? What happened to the dignity of the Muslim? There was a time where the robe and the turban was a mark of honor. Now it's a mark of, look at this backward creature clothing himself in a blanket. Why is he dressed like that? Muslims, the non-Muslims, they used to come from Europe to study in our universities. Today, when you look at the graduation robe and cap, that's not a Western invention. That's a Muslim invention. Muslims, graduation, that's how we used to graduate from our universities. Your teacher gave you a robe of honor. He put a jubba on you. And the turban was set. You had different turban sizes. In the Ottoman system, they had different turban styles depending on which field you graduated in. So if you are in jurisprudence, there was a different turban, and then you were given like a pen and a pot of ink and a special engraving and everything, and your ijaza, which was your diploma. We came up with that, and they took it from us. So that was a mark of honor. To dress like that, to be a Muslim was a mark of honor. Now it's this complete flip where, we think that to dress like them and to do their graduation ceremonies, that's the mark of honor. That for you to be known in the world, you need to have a degree from Oxford University. The piece of paper from Al-Azhar doesn't mean anything. You need to have something that says University of California or something like that. That other one doesn't mean anything. So we've become a society where we are so thirsty for Western recognition and Western respect that we've lost our own dignity and respect. And it's just amazing what we have become. Just amazing. Our worldview is just very different from the early Muslims and the companions. Very, very different. Anyway, is there any other question? I see someone writing down a question. Let's wait for it. What do you mean defend the Muslims and not Islam? That's a very blunt question. We have, to begin with, to see how Muslims usually, a lot of Muslims behave, you have these, things like speakers' corners and platforms where debates take place. You will see a lot of these YouTube channels, and they call it the Da'wah scene, very interesting name, Da'wah scene. Again, that modern language, that decrypt asinine language to define what we do based off of a perspective that is not ours. That's how they define things, you see, the scene and the thing. Anyway, but they come up on these platforms and they will have arguments and debates against atheists and Christians and Ahmadiyya and Shia and all these different sects who have, even ex-Muslims have organized themselves and coming up with debates and whatnot, and they come up with these debates. And their objective here is that they're defending Islam. They're coming up with these arguments to defend Islam. And it's really a modern movement, because in the past, scholars did engage in debates, but these were scholarly debates. They were academics. They debated bishops and they debated intellectuals of other traditions. This was on a scholarly level. In recent history, this actually began with Sheikh Ahmed Deedat. Like I said, there were others who did that before him, but what really popularized this was Sheikh Ahmed Deedat. And I'm not going to blame him, rahimahullah. He did a phenomenal job. He did, I mean, amazing. He came up with, his main opposition was really Christianity, but he did have debates with Jews and with Hindus also. And he wasn't a scholar per se, he was really a scholar. He was working as a working man. And something really troubled him is when he would see in South Africa, these missionaries would come in and they would come up with arguments and statements, sometimes pointing out ayat from the Quran to show Muslims, the unwary Muslims, that, oh, look, there's a flaw in your religion, so that's why you need to accept the book of Christ, you see, or stuff like that. And this really troubled him. And what really troubled him even more was that the ulama of his generation and his place were not really raising a voice against that. And so he decided to try and do something himself. And he started by studying the Bible. He went through it properly. He a phenomenal intellect himself and a phenomenal memory, that he started constructing very logical arguments in defense of. But what was it in defense of? He was not defending Islam. He was defending the Muslims from getting corrupted. He was presenting these arguments not as an opposition to the Christians, but for the Muslims to be aware as well that, oh, no, I need to watch out for this. This is dangerous. And the ulama at that time did not like that, did not like what he was doing. He said, oh, no, this is not the way to do da'wah. And he argued back and said, I'm not doing da'wah. I'm providing a defense for the Muslims, because you people are failing at your job. You're not educating the Muslims to these dangerous ideologies. And so they're getting confused and they're getting swayed, and some of them are leaving Islam. And that was his main concern and his opposition. Now, because this was also the age of mass media, a lot of his lectures were taped. The news spread. Muslims would come in large groups to watch him. Unfortunately, for many of these people, it became a matter of entertainment. See, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, putting the Christians in their place, knocking them left, right, and center. That's not what he was doing. It became a matter of entertainment. And that then spawned another generation of Muslims who now had things like YouTube and all these. And so they came up with all these things. Their core excuse of doing all this is either, number one, we are doing da'wah, or number two, we are defending Islam from attack by these kuffar who, they want to attack Islam and they want to diminish Islam and they want to ruin Islam and they want to corrupt Islam and they want to do Islam. But Islam does not need you to defend it. Islam is self-evident. It is self-evident. The Prophet ﷺ did not need to convince people that Islam was true. He never needed to do that. He presented it the way it was. It was for them to understand whether this is truth or not. The Prophet never defended Islam. He defended the Muslims. The scholars of the past did not defend Islam. They didn't come up with arguments for Islam. They came up with arguments so that the Muslims could defend their own thoughts from being corrupted. Because you will get logical arguments. If you read some of these books, one of the books that I've seen that has really penetrated the Muslim world is, I forgot the title of it, but I know the writer is a Jew. Yuval Nahiri or something like that. His name is Yuval something. Yuval Nahiri or something like that. He's a futurist evolutionist. And he has got incredibly logical arguments. Incredibly logical arguments. Really well crafted. I'll give him hats off for that. As far as logic is concerned, as a logician, I can give you full marks. And these are the books that are being taught in universities. I don't know if anyone here can testify to that. If you're a medical student, I'm pretty sure you've seen that book in your library, and it's even probably been recommended to you. If not taught as a course, it's probably been recommended to you as reading material by your professors. But that book is used, and it is a foolproof argument for the necessary existence of humankind through evolution. Meaning that he's providing he's saying it's not even doubtful or something that it's like theoretical. No, he's saying this is absolute truth. Human beings have evolved. We have from an evolutionary origin. I've seen Muslims trying to validate that with the Quran. I've seen Muslims going into the Quran, looking at ayat, certain ayat, interpreting prepositions like min or fi or ila, those things, to twist the meaning of the Quran to say, no, the Quran actually agrees with that, with the evolutionary idea, or the idea of Neanderthals, or the idea of all these kinds of notions. That's what we need a defense from. We need to defend Muslims from these ideas. Islam itself does not need defense. Islam is self-evident. We just need to present it. And we use that self-evident truth to formulate our ideas so that we can then have defenses for Muslims to use, whether they're going to use that for their own education or when they are presented with these type of, near factual, I wouldn't say factual, but sound logic or logical arguments, they can see it for what it is, because we have foolproof arguments that can help them. So scholars in the past did this. Like I mentioned, Fakhruddin al-Razi, 70 proof for the existence of God. Who was he doing it for? The Muslim does not need that. You don't need 70 proofs to affirm La ilaha illallah. That's what the old woman said. He must have had 70 doubts for him to develop 70 proofs, but he wasn't doing it for himself, nor was he doing it for the Muslim to establish his tawheed. It was so that because there were atheistic standpoints that came in, that were coming in and providing counterpoints. What about this? What about that? What about this? And Muslims getting confused. Oh, no, we haven't thought about that. Oh, now that throws everything into, in a different dimension. Christians were doing that also. One of the reasons why Ilm al-Kalam was developed was for that reason, because Christians were providing arguments for the word of God and the embodiment of God and things like these, because it was very logical. Their theology supports it. And so Muslims looking at that and saying, no, maybe Christianity is true because it makes sense. I mean, look at the way, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, logically it makes sense, but is it true? So the Muslim scholars develop these arguments for the defense of the Muslims, not for defense of Islam. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So, come on. Any other question? From chat? No one? If not, we can conclude, inshallah.
Yes, Sister, I don't see any questions from my side. I think we can conclude the session, inshallah.
Inshallah, we can conclude. I will recommend, if you haven't started reading the book, to start reading the book, and please join the book club together with Jasran, Adil. I think Sister Hina is on as well, and everyone else who has been joining in, and have these discussions. And inshallah, we can further. I mean, there are a lot of things. A book like this, I still read it and I find new understandings from it that I missed before. I mean, just today when I was going through that section, I actually added a few notes. My book has got like writings all over the margins. So I actually added a few more notes that I missed out last time. So, that's what philosophy is about in Islam. In Islam, philosophy is about expanding your understanding, using philosophical tools and these instruments to expand understanding. And so I would encourage you to invest in these books and to study these, because these will actually, and one interesting thing about Sayyid Naqib, very similar to Muhammad Iqbal, they were writing in response to this amazing, marvelous, really magnificent transformation of human civilization that is unprecedented in all of human history. It's the direction in which the world is headed towards. And one of the things that really prompted these individuals to really start considering, because it had stagnated, the Muslim civilization had reached stagnation. And in sociology, when a civilization reaches stagnation, then and it doesn't salvage itself, or then it is basically on its way to extinction. So we actually stagnated in the things that made our civilization strong and powerful, and that was the pursuit, the preservation, and the transmission of knowledge. But when certain transformations started taking place from the late 1800s in the 19th century, basically, into the 20th century, which is now the last 100 plus years, from the establishment of the Zionist movement to World War I, the loss of the Ottoman Caliphate, World War II, and then this amazing, marvelous thing that happened in 1947 with the United Nations, and then in 1948 with the establishment of the State of Israel, had really jolted the Muslim philosophers to re-examine what it is that this world is about. Because this transformation that is a global phenomenon, when examined from an historical perspective, you have the British Empire that has, not just the British Empire, but Europe as a whole, France and Germany and Belgium and all these nations, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, and their colonization that they spread out, much of their culture became assimilated into all other cultures in the world. From languages being restructured and redefined, to clothing, to governmental structures, society as a whole, everything. And some of the key players in the world, these being like East Africans, South Africans, and West Africans, and North Africans, basically Africa as a whole, and the Indian subcontinent, in addition to the Asian subcontinent, which is China and Japan, as well as much of the Middle Eastern regions, the Arab nations. I mean, even those who are in India know this. Like, if you look at your infrastructure and you look at your systems, they're basically British systems. Your legislation systems, your jurisprudence systems are British systems. Your lawyers and your judges still wear white wigs on their heads for some reason, and a black robe with a fanciful necktie, and even the way the formatting, and we are basically running off of that Western structure. Somehow the structure that was established before has been eradicated, which was really the structure that the Muslims had established. That includes the language, the writing systems for all of these countries was dramatically transformed. The Turkic script was transformed. Urdu retained the script. Hindi removed the script entirely and re-established its original script of the Devanagari. Many of the East African nations used to initially write in the Arabic script, and they transformed that, adapted the Latin script. So all these transformations took place. There's something unique that is taking place here when examined as a whole. And so writers like these, that's a long statement that I've given, but writers like these, Sayyid Naqib, are really providing you with an understanding of what that is. What is going on here? How do we explain this transformation? Because it is driven by ideology and philosophy, and therefore its address must also be ideological and philosophical. You cannot address this transformation using Aqeedah or Fiqh. You can't, it's impossible. You have to address it at its own level, which is philosophical. So he's providing you with that philosophy and that explanation. And this is why I think the one statement that really captures everything in what we read today was this statement, which is on page 2, in which he says, such as a worldview based upon a system of thought that was originally God-centered, then gradually became God-world-centered, and is now world-centered, and perhaps shifting again to form a new thesis in the dialectical process. He's not naming it outrightly, but it's what we would call the anti-God-centered world, which is what's being established today, the anti-Christal world, the age of the Dajjal. And so to understand that, to really understand what is transforming, what is happening here, you have to examine it from a philosophical perspective. And for you to successfully penetrate it, it's not just any philosophy you would apply. It would be a philosophy that is defined by the worldview of Islam. And that's what he's really set out to do. You know, if you master this book, this will suffice in you having an understanding in philosophy. This will suffice. I don't have any other contemporary philosophical works on my shelves. I don't. I have just this book. I have this book, and I have the Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam by Allama Iqbal. I don't have any other contemporary philosopher on my shelf. I have read this book so many times. I basically memorized a lot of the passages in this book. This is my go-to study. All I have aside from this in philosophy are Plato and Aristotle. I have the classical philosophers, Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, and Al-Ghazali, and those. I don't have any other contemporary. I don't need any other. This will suffice. This is enough for you to understand what's happening in the world today. Whether you want to apply that knowledge in eschatology, you want to apply it in political analysis, in just whatever field you want to apply it at. If you can grasp what he's telling you in here, that suffices. It's enough. Anyway, let's, I think, end here for tonight. We have really, I think, stretched into 3 hours. So we'll stop here, inshallah. We'll see everyone for the Sira class on Sunday, inshallah. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاكم الله خيرا الحمد لله